Welcome, everyone. I'm very pleased to welcome Karen Healey Wallace today to chat with us briefly about her astonishing self-published book. I was last week at London Book Fair and I saw Karen present, and it was really an astonishing achievement. I've never seen anyone self-publish anything quite like it. Karen has said, book production in the hands of writers should create books nobody's done, nobody's even dreamed of, because they come unimpeded out of your imagination. So welcome, Karen. It's really exciting to have you here with us.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. And yes, I think I sounded more articulate probably in that quote you just gave than I will live on air. But I do think that I know we're going to talk about Gil and his relationship to the book and his really general overtaking of what was just going to be a standard piece of fiction. But it does seem to me illogical that books in the hands of authors aren't the best books on the market. And, you know, there wasn't an age, there was a time when vanity publishing, as they called it then, was the high end of the market. You know, the idea that an author that could see their book through in exactly the way they wanted it should produce the most beautiful books. So it seems to me just a strange anomaly that self-publishing now means rubbish, really. It means lots of badly produced print-on-demand books. It means typographical errors. It doesn't need to be, and it shouldn't be. So I hope The Perfect Capital is a pathfinder for more books like this.
Yeah, no, I certainly, I think so. And well, why can't you just show us briefly the book and show us exactly what it looks like? Because it's quite an object. It's really great.
Here's Exhibit A, and I'll just give you a little bit about the, we might look in the book later and have a look about some of the design principles that went into this book. But I think to start with, I'll show you the spine, because it's got the Perfect Capital has actually, the spine title has replaced the collator's marks.
Oh yeah, no, I can see it.
Which was probably one of the bravest things I thought I did, because you obviously can't see the title at all, but I did make the executive decision that people don't make book choices from 50 feet away. They usually walk right up to it and see whether they want it. But just a very brief background about how this whole thing came into being. The Perfect Capital is a piece of fiction. It's literary fiction, and it's about one woman's quest to find the perfect letter form of Eric Gill. So the story weaves that character's artistic discoveries, which looks at Eric Gill's real life inscriptions in London. That is woven into the other side of the storyline, which is where this, you know, very old-fashioned, very high-minded character falls in with the world's most imperfect man. So my two characters are called Maud and Edward, and in a way, in my mind, the fiction, the narrative, is deconstructed Gill. I took the perfect artist and put him in one character, and then I took what anyone who knows anything about Gill will know was a highly imperfect man, and I put him in another character. And that was originally where I was going to leave it. What I didn't realize was going to happen, and I think it's summed up best. There's a lovely quote by an eminent typographer and contemporary of Gill called Beatrice Ward. And when she was trying to segregate a piece of Gill's work for examination, she said, either the whole man comes up or else the tweezers slip and you've lost what you sought. And I absolutely experienced that in my relationship. So I found myself unable to pick and choose the parts of Gill that I wanted. In the writing of it, the book ended up with this sort of treadmill preoccupation with sex that I originally never intended. That's on the one side. On the other side, I was writing the design brief for the book when I knew I was going to be self-publishing it, and the book literally appeared fully formed in my head. So while I did need to find a designer and I did need to find a printer, I actually never submitted that brief because I knew exactly what I wanted. I knew I wanted more or less this book. I just had to find the people to make it happen.
And that's amazing. So you decided then to go for this this unique design, and then how did it work? Did you approach printers? Did you approach? Just talk us through that process of how you actually got to doing that.
Okay, well, the nice thing is that, I ended up making something special, but I never decided to make something special. I didn't sit down and go, this is going to be a really beautiful book. My only decision was to make a book that was absolutely right for my story. And again, when I say absolutely right for my story, I thought the perfect book in my mind isn't just an advertisement for the story that's inside it. It actually tells the story from the moment you pick it up. Because I didn't know what I was doing, I was in the lovely position to be able to make the book that I chose to make, rather than, to make the book that convention or machinery would allow. It's having the idea and saying, how can I make this work, rather than knowing how things work and limiting your ideas to that. So in one respect, my utter stupidity ended up working in my favor. So as I said, I conceived the book. I knew that I wanted a type-only book that fit with my story, as it's about my heroine is a letter cutter, so that fit. And everything about the book, of course, it's not in stone, it's in paper, but it has a feeling of stone. It's very simple. It feels like an art book. And obviously the story is about an artist inside. So, it was interesting. I met a reader who actually went into Waterstones in Piccadilly a year after The Perfect Capital was published. And she actually had heard of the book, but she didn't know the name of the book, and she actually didn't know the author's name either. Now, for a bookseller to deal with that at all would be really difficult. But she said, I think it looks really special. I think it's white. I've seen it. And immediately the bookseller said, oh, that's that book about an artist. We have it.
Yeah. So the book you're holding currently, in my mind, is something which, as it were, conventional publishers would not be able to produce. It could only have been produced, having now thought about it, by yourself or by someone who is really driven by creating something that seems so complex to create. And I bet that was quite a difficult thing to try and sell, because talk me through the decision of, it seems to me you decided to create an object and something which was physical and therefore not distributable, at least initially, for example, on ebooks or in other formats. Can you talk me a bit through that decision?
Yeah, I can. And again, it sounds like I had some quite high-minded ideas. This was absolutely an exercise, one foot in front of the other. That's all that happened. And if there's one overriding idea here, it's that this book is absolutely the right book for the story inside it. And in a way, every author's book is going to be different. So therefore, every author will have, their own unique path. But I have to confess, I started looking at this once I'd written the manuscript. I had a first draft of the manuscript. I went through all the possible channels. I looked at Wattpad and all the different online forums. I considered putting it online chapter by chapter. I thought about doing an ebook only on Amazon. I explored the easy options first, because I didn't particularly want to get into the difficulty and the expense and the rigor of producing pallets of physical books to go in physical bookshops, not unless it was right. And the reason I ended up doing that was because I wrote a piece of literary fiction. And the kind of person who would read this book wouldn't be looking for it on any of those digital forums. If I'd written a piece of erotic fiction in the wake of 50 Shades of Grey, I would have uploaded it online. It would have been right for the material that I produced. Maybe if I'd written crime, I could have, put something on Amazon and actually just literally followed in the wake of those other of a real genre of books. But mine was literary fiction, and therefore it's by the very nature of it a more subtle and complex beast.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
therefore, I think bookshops is the right way to sell it. I sort of think if the if I were a composer and I'd composed a symphony, I wouldn't want that symphony to be programmed into a synthesizer and hear instruments and hear sampled instruments playing it. I would want to hear a real orchestra play it.
Yeah.
And I think this is a piece of literary fiction. It deserved to be a book, and it therefore needed to be in bookshops. And therefore, in a way, my future was carved for me. I didn't have any other choice.
Yeah. Show, just for our viewers, just go through one or two of the specific designs, just on the spine, but also inside. I'm interested in the text and the margins, because that's really detailed.
Okay, well, let me try and whip through this. I mean, in a way, it's very easy, because Eric Gill wrote a book on book design. It's called An Essay on Typography, and if you read that, you will actually get this. If there's one thing about Gill, he was very unsentimental and incredibly forthright. So his view about books, he only had one main principle, which is books are meant to be read. And so everything to do with his designs are to help a reader read the book. So, for example, just before I open it up, you'll see it's a type-only cover, which is right for the Perfect Capital, because it has a typographer as its presiding genius, and it has a letter cutter as its main character. But I slightly think that it's a thought for all books. I think it's interesting that all of us who believe in the written word, who are in any way involved in literature, we believe in the power of the written word. We talk about it all the time. And yet when it comes to selling books, people just bung a picture on it. So what's the logic in that? That's actually just supporting the thought that a picture is worth 1,000 words. Surely the book industry should be saying, actually, a well-chosen word or a well-chosen combination of words is worth 15 million pixels. So, sometimes I look at a shelf of books in a bookshop and I think, it looks like a shelf of DVDs. The only real difference is the spine width is thicker. So, I look at these and think there are a lot of things that were absolutely right for the Perfect Capital, but I think at a time when physical books are perhaps threatened or certainly have a lot more competition, I think we're living in a time when books need to behave more like books and less like other forms of entertainment. So anyway, I'll just rattle through. I took too much time on the cover. So, but Gill absolutely said the title of a book is merely the thing to know it by. So he would put the title, and that's it. Open the book, and before we just look at the type layouts, you'll see. Hold on, I feel like I'm on Blue Peter now. You're actually straight into the story. The usual publishing page, which at the end of the day is just an advertisement for the people who made the book. It's got nothing to do with the story. I've put at the end of the book, and again, that's not my idea. It's Gill's idea. He said the publishing page should go at the end of the book, quote, where it naturally belongs. And again, I don't think that's just a point for this book. I think it could be true for all books. So the moment the reader opens the cover, they're absolutely straight into the story. There's no ad for the people who made it. There's no "To my darling Deirdre, I'll never forget you." You're just straight into the story, and leave all that for the end. When you get into the pages, I think the thing that people comment on the most are these incredibly wide margins. And all the inside spreads were done by a really good type designer called Jonathan Muddle. And but they all came from an essay on typography. So again, Gill just used logic for this. A book is designed to be read. and a book is held in the human hand. So his point with the margins is twofold. One, you need to separate the text from the rest of the room, from the rest of the world. The margins in a book are equivalent to dimming the lights in a cinema. You need to take your reader, you need to get rid of all the distractions and just take your reader into the text. It's the stillness of literature that every author tries to create so they can lead their reader into this world. You know, design can really help that. But if you pick up a modern published book, a recently published book, you will see that the type is driven to the edges. And I presume it's to save paper, but it doesn't really help with the reading. So, you know, the margins are the most obvious thing, but you also see this ragged right margin. Gill believed very strongly that for extended text, which is what happens when you read a novel, the actual words themselves need to be evenly spaced. And of course, I don't think people realize when you get that justified right-hand margin, it means the words in the sentence are not all evenly spaced. So yeah. I don't know what the research is on that, but Gill said it vexes the eye to have words that are not evenly spaced. And then of course the Perfect Capital uses his Joanna typeface, which we don't really have time to get into, but he developed Joanna specifically for extended text. And it has things like the capital letters are often smaller than the ascenders of the small letters, which just brings a real evenness of color to the page.
Yeah, it's just such a wonderful, engaging. It immediately looks so different and looks like absorbing, I guess is the word, which it immediately conveys. It's no surprise that, I mean, the book was nominated for Best British Book Award shortlist and also for Best Editorial Design Award shortlist. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's an amazing achievement. I think it just shows the dedication the length to which you went using Gill. I guess the question I really want to ask is, it seemed like it took so much. Would you do it again? Would you? What comment do you have that, or is it something that you enjoyed exploring and would pursue again?
I think I would absolutely do it again. You know, in a way, one of the things that drove me is this was my debut novel, and there are a lot of authors out there, and there are a lot of books out there, and I think it's important for any author that you enter the arena as you mean to occupy it. So I don't think I could write a story and then publish a book that wasn't utterly right for that story. Yeah. And yeah. If I couldn't find a publisher, a traditional publisher, that wanted to do that with me, or that I trusted to do that for me, then of course I would self-publish it again. You know, the delightful part about self-publishing is that, and I don't know why it was ever divided differently, but the whole artistic side of the book I see as being the writing, the design, and the print. You know, I see those as all being one job, really. And, you know, of course, as I said, I'm not a designer. So while I conceived the book, I needed to get a designer to do it. But we very much worked together as a team. Of course, there is then the really practical, really difficult part of publishing, which is that if you self-publish, and I also had a self-publishing company, you know, to help me with a lot of the practical things, writing the information sheets for booksellers and what have you. But you don't have a sales force, for one thing. Yeah. So, you know, for me, I had to, in order to get this book into bookshops, I had to physically walk it in myself, and which I did to certainly every bookshop in London anyway, which was probably 50 or 60 bookshops. And if there was one really unpleasant and yet ultimately rewarding part of this publication, it was that. Because I promise you, when a bookseller sees an author walk in with their book, they start to think that self-harming looks like a happier option. You know, you can see it in their eyes. They just look desperate. And that's where, you know, in retrospect, I didn't realize, I knew that the design of my book was going to be important because I had to go into this presuming that I would get no advertisements, no reviews, no PR. In fact, I ended up getting quite a lot, but I had to walk in presuming that the only advertisement for this book was going to be the book itself. And what I didn't realize was just how helpful that was going to be when I got to booksellers. Because you walk into a bookseller, they're very, very busy. It's not that they're not nice people or that they're not interested in literature. They're really busy. Plus, there are 3,274 physical books published every week. They don't have time to talk to the author of every book. And equally, I'd written a piece of literary fiction. You know, fiction is subtle and complex and very difficult to try and sell. It's very difficult to reduce to a soundbite and very difficult to sell in the 15 seconds that, if you're lucky, you're going to have to sell it. The lovely thing with me is, you know, once I'd suffered, you know, that 30 seconds of a bookseller wanting to top themselves before talking to me, all I had to do was hand them the book. I didn't have to talk about the book at all.
And it spoke for itself, I guess. I mean, it's just such an amazing design, and yeah, it's really a wonderful story. And Karen, I think it's such a great example of just the lengths to which self-publishing can go to in all directions. And I think it's really great. So listen, we're going to put all the images on our website and attach to all the links so that people can go and buy the book and see it for themselves. And I'd like to thank you so much for talking to us today. And
thank you for having me, and also thank you for being so enthusiastic about The Perfect Capital.
I think it's absolutely fantastic, and it's a great example. And no, we look forward to seeing what happens in the future. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you.